Hello there. My name is Megan Fortune. I am a middle school ELA teacher. I'm going to be talking to you today about student-centered assessments and how to implement them using the Plan, Do, Study, Act, or PDSA cycle. Here is our agenda for this presentation. I'm going to explain the problem that we're seeing in our classroom, then I'll talk about who is in the class and who is in the test group. Next, we'll have a brief overview of the PDSA cycle. After that, we will look at the formative assessment I plan to implement and see what the steps of the cycle would actually look like. Finally, we'll check out how the assessment may appear after it has been implemented full scale. 60% of the student population in the school is below grade level in writing. Without significant progress from most students, this will not change, and our students will remain below grade level. Something needs to be done to help students attain mastery. Formative assessments can help with this, but there are some stumbling blocks to traditional teacher-led feedback. If a teacher is to take the time to give feedback to every student for every stage of the writing process in enough detail to help each student learn, it often takes too long to get back to them to have any impact on the writing process. Conversely, if the teacher speeds through the feedback, there may be some gaps in the information that is passed along to the students. In addition, to be truly successful, students need to be at the center of the learning process. With teacher-evaluated assessment, there is no student buy-in. All of these factors together lead to little progress. Let's look at our student population and sample group. The students' ages range from 12 to 14. There's a mixture of genders, and approximately half of our students are minorities. The sample population chosen for this pilot of our assessment is about a quarter of the class. We have 6 students. 1 is above grade level in writing, 2 are on level, and half of them are below grade level. As you can see, this stratified sample is representative of the class at large. So we need a new plan. Peer feedback is a possible solution, but we need some way to implement it without throwing the whole class off course while we work out the kinks. That's where the PDSA cycle comes in. The PDSA cycle was designed and revised by Dr. W. Edwards Deming, based on work by Walter Schuhart. It is loosely based on the scientific method with inquiry at its core. The divergence from the scientific method comes from the fact that the PDSA aims to make improvements, while scientific inquiry is designed to test hypotheses, but not necessarily to make improvements from the results. Originally created as a development cycle for product design, it was later adopted by the healthcare industry and is now used in various fields, including education. Let's look at each step. The first step is plan. Here, we will decide what needs to be changed and plan for how to change it. We can ask some specific questions, such as, how will we know that what we have changed is actually an improvement over what we already had? In regards to our student-centered assessment, we would look back on our deficits, like student buy-in and progress towards mastery. If there's improvement in those areas, we can assume that we improved the outcomes. We also need to formulate our hypothesis and decide how the participants will be chosen and how long the trial will last. The next step is do. This is where we put the plan into action. It's important that we stick with the plan we made. Much like in the scientific method, our observations and data will only have meaning if we're following through with our original plan. If we deviate, our data is compromised. We also need to make sure that we're observing our trial, and in the case of educators, observing our students and their performance. The third step is study. Here, we will analyze the data and compare it to the predictions we made in the beginning. Some things to focus on here are what went right and what went wrong. Did our results match our predictions? What do our results indicate? The final step is act. Now we have the information at our disposal to inform our actions. Should we adopt the change as we tried it? Should we abandon it entirely? Or should we make changes based on our data and run the cycle again? Should we test on a larger scale, tweak something minor, or change things in a different way? These are questions we must ask ourselves after we have studied the data. If we decide to keep going with trials, we would head back to the plan stage and create a new hypothesis as well as a new strategy. Now that we have a better idea of how to run the PDSA cycle, it's time to look at the new student-centered assessment that we're going to try. If you remember, our main problem was that our students are, on average, below grade level in writing. We're also trying to cultivate student buy-in by allowing them more involvement. We've decided to try out a peer review of student papers with a small group from our 7th grade ELA class. Peer review will be done in 2 groups of 3. 3 students per group will allow each student to review and be reviewed by 2 different students. We will use shared Google Docs, allowing peers to add comments but not directly edit the document. We will focus on content and style rather than mechanics and grammar, and we'll use a rubric to guide the comments and provide peer assessment. Here is a sample rubric for this assessment. As you can see, the categories on the left focus the students on 5 specific content and style choices, and each level is color-coded to make it easier to follow. The rubric is formatted in Lexend, a version of a dyslexic-friendly font. Any assessment content, including rubrics, should be designed during the planning phase of the cycle. The hypothesis should also be included at this stage. We want to articulate how we predict that our change, the independent variable, will affect the situation, our dependent variable. In this instance, we predict that the new formative assessment will improve student writing. I've also added the goals I have for the assessment, namely student understanding, motivation, and empowerment. Finally, a plan would not be complete without how to accomplish it. In this case, what we want the students to do and the timeline for the trial. There will be a day to review 2 peers' work. Next day, they will be given time to revise their own work based on the reviews they received. A 3rd day will be allotted to allow the teacher to look over the revisions as well as the comments and study the results. This would be a good time to get student feedback, especially to find out if there was anything that could be adjusted to make this more successful. Giving students a voice in the process and trusting them to have a say in what we do is a great way to empower them. In an actual trial, we would now go through the next 3 steps of the PDSA cycle. We give our trial group the rubrics and instructions to help them put constructive comments on their peers' papers. And we allow the students time to revise their papers based on the feedback they receive. Then we look over the work, study the results, talk to the students, and analyze the amount of improvement in the writing compared to the students that are not in the trial group. Armed with that data and the analysis of it, we're ready to act, determining what the next steps are. If the results didn't go as planned, what was the reason? Did we add too many categories to the rubric? Do we need to print the papers and let the students write on them? Maybe this would work better in a workshop-style session where students talk it out rather than just leave comments. Could it have been the instructions given or the amount of time allowed? What can be changed for the next cycle? If the results seem to validate the hypothesis, should we perform a larger or longer trial? Or should we implement it as it is? Once these questions are answered, we know where to go next. Either a new cycle, implementation, or abandonment. Let's assume that we saw a marked improvement in the revisions of the test group. This could be the first cycle or after 3 or 4 cycles. Comments show they all felt instructions and guidance were sufficient, and the strategy is ready to be implemented across the cohort. When we're ready to roll it out, we need to take some time to teach the process to everyone. We should give the students clear instructions. These should be explicitly taught and practiced. We can include graphics to help them be successful. Support should be given in whatever way best helps all students succeed. Guidelines for students should be clear and readily available. Ideally, in student-centered assessments and learning, there is clear input from students. Make sure to incorporate the ideas garnered during the student comments about the trial into the finished product. Here we have the reviewer checklist and the expectations for the reviews, and the peer review rubric showing expectations to guide the feedback. Students should also have access to samples of excellent feedback and acceptable feedback, showing what counts for each, as well as examples of what not to do. This is just one example of what you can use the PDSA cycle for. As mentioned earlier, it's useful in many facets. Don't be afraid to give it a try. There are lots of resources online to help guide you. To sum it up, student-centered assessments can improve motivation, student buy-in, and learning. The PDSA cycle can be used to help educators implement new ideas in a way that allows for revision before full-scale implementation to reduce any confusion among students. Thank you so much for watching. All my references for this presentation, including quote attribution where available, is on the next slide. If you have any questions or comments, please do not hesitate to send me an email at megan.fortune0410@my.ace.edu. Have a great day.